with that.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to BSing Sports, where we do a little BSing and we talk a lot about sports. I'm Bill. With me, as always, is Ryan, drinking out of a nice fancy coffee cup that he's got going on over there.
Shout out to Blackwater.
I realized that our caption this week was Eagles draft preview. We've decided to push that back literally last second until we're a little bit closer to the draft. As is, it's baseball season. We feel like we should talk baseball. We're going to stick primarily with the Phillies, simply because that's what we are well versed in. And honestly, Ryan and I have both worked a lot this week. We're running a little bit behind on some information here.
Yeah, I ended up staying in a hotel the last 2 days because we worked so much, and the company was paying for hotels for anybody that lived like more than 30 minutes away. So,
yeah, that's intense. I mean, good.
Yeah.
I mean, good for you, job and everything.
Yeah, I mean, woohoo! Going to split shifts in like 2 weeks though, so it's gonna be super nice.
That sounds like it will be nice.
Yeah, finally get the salary. Anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, like I said, we're gonna do is we're just gonna talk Phillies, decide what we're the whole roster, how we think it's gonna play out, and maybe how many wins we think they're gonna get this season. You wanna fire away? Who we know that Aaron Nola starts the year on the hill, but what about closer, Ryan? Who do you think the Phillies are gonna utilize for closer?
So I think that there's a couple weak points in the Phillies roster. First off, I'm looking at our background right now, and I swear I've never been able to get my hair to look that epic since that day. Like, every strand looks perfect. It might just be Allie's camera.
It's probably Allie's camera, and it was on Christmas Day, so you probably tried extra hard to look good. Who knows?
I think I tried to look extra hard to look good just because I knew we were taking that photo.
Well, good job on that.
Anyway, back to baseball. So first off, I am more excited for this Phillies team than I have been since we acquired Roy Halladay, which unfortunately we obviously didn't win a World Series with him. But the major offseason acquisitions kind of gives off the same vibe, which should say a lot because we signed Schwarber, we signed we got Castellanos, we got all these big pieces, and all of these pieces together make up for about one guy that we traded for who spent 2 good years here. Speaks volumes. Anywho, you asked me about the closer. So there are 3 or 4 individuals with full-time closer experience in this bullpen. You mentioned Sir Anthony Dominguez, and I think he's the least likely candidate, and it's probably just because he hasn't pitched an MLB game in 2 years. It's been 2 years, right?
Yeah,
2020 and 2021 he missed.
No, I think he pitched 1 game last year and then immediately went back on the IR.
Okay, so essentially 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think he's the least likely candidate to take over the role. I think they'll probably use him in probably wider margin situations to begin with, depending on what he's done in the spring. It's been tough for me to keep up with spring ball, but I think he'll be used in wide margin scenarios. Let him get his feet wet a little bit. Let him get back on the mound. Get back into the flow of the game. That being said, the one who is probably the most successful, but is probably the most far removed from being a closer, is Rhys Hoskins. So he's also the least likely. And Brad Hand was a full-time closer, was an all-star for the Cleveland Indians, was a huge trade chip back in 2020 after he had that all-star season in 2019 as a closer. However, him being left-handed poses a little bit of an issue if you have a right-handed top of the ninth or bottom of the ninth, whatever. So the most likely candidate could be Corey Knebel, but they could also go by committee too. That seems to be the way baseball's moving, toward the analytics, toward the metrics. I disagree with that fully. I believe finding one full-time closer is probably the most effective way. I think if you give individual pitchers set roles and tell them, hey, you can expect to come in the game when it looks like this, they'll tend to perform a little bit better rather than, we're just going to flip a coin or pick names out of a hat depending on the scenario. So I personally believe that Corey Knebel is is who I would give the nod to be the opening day closer, but he knows that he has competition in that pen, and I just wholeheartedly believe Joe Girardi is going to go closer by committee here.
Yeah, so I'm glad you actually said closer by committee, because that's what I thought it was going to be when they brought in Brad Hand, when they brought in Juris Familiar, when they brought in Corey Knable. I thought from the get-go that it was going to be a closer by committee situation, and it may not only be by committee per game. I'm talking like per batter. As you pointed out, Brad Hand is left-handed. The other two guys are right-handed. It could just be situational baseball all the way from when the starter gets out of the game to the time the game ends for Joe Girardi.
Well, with the rule changes, they make that hard now. You got to face at least 3 batters.
I forgot about that rule. So thank you for bringing that up as well.
Yeah, unless it's the end of an inning or beginning of an inning. But however, I see closer by committee here. However, I disagree with that move entirely. I believe, like I said, as somebody you love to talk about, Scott Kingery. If you give somebody a set role, the numbers show they tend to do a little bit better. I get metrics and all that. However, I think metrics don't define the personal aspect of baseball and sports in general, really. So I think giving Knable his shot, I think that'd probably be the one that I would go to first, but closer by committee all the way. Now I say, Knable his shot. If you have 3 lefties in the top of the 9th and you're trying to close out a 1-run game, obviously it should be Brad Hand's game. But
yeah, and I'm with you there as well. I agree. We brought Knable in, and when they signed him, it sounded like he was going to be the closer full time. They haven't come out and said that he's going to be the closer, obviously.
Did they give him $6 million?
Yeah, and it's a 1-year deal. It's not like it's a huge contract by any means, but they did bring him in when he was originally announced. They announced him as the closing pitcher.
I think Hand and Familia are both also on 1-year deals. I think now I admire the fact that we'll get into the big offensive additions in a minute. There's a lot to talk about there. I admire the fact that Dave Dombrowski decided this is the offseason, I'm going to go do something. Now, Familia and Hand and Knable, they could all suck. They could all be terrible. They could all come here and pitch to the tune of 5 ERAs. But that's not Dombrowski's fault. These guys have some sort of track record of success. He went out, he spent the money, he made the moves, he did everything he could, down to coaching these guys how to be better, to make this team better. So no matter what happens with this, I'm going to go ahead and tip my cap to Dave Dombrowski. Now, just because he finally, did what previous management failed to do and went out and made a splash. This is a fan base that has been starving to get back in the playoffs. We're considered a big market team who hasn't been to the playoffs in 10 years. That's super unheard of.
11,
when you talk about big market teams not going to the playoffs for double-digit amount of years, doesn't happen. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that Dave Dombrowski gets an A in my book for this offseason, regardless of how the moves come out, because whether they get hurt a lot, whether they underperform, the track record was there to justify going to get these guys and to change this team around. So I believe that this is a good first step, and I think this sends a message to the fan base, and it sends the right one.
Yeah, and to your point, last year the bullpen, they blew 37 games or something like that in closing situations, within the last 2 innings. And as a result, Dombrowski went out, as you pointed out, and wanted to be like, look, I realized that our bullpen was not good last year, and I wanted to address it, and he did. To his credit, he let the guys that we got at the trade deadline go, and he brought in Knable, Hand, Familia, and he let Neris go. Neris had been hanging by a thread for years. Nobody in the fan base understood why he was here, still, as long as he was anyway. And again, to your point, Dave Dombrowski went out, made a splash in free agency, and we haven't even talked about the Schwarber and Castellanos, how big that's going to be in the lineup. We're talking strictly on the pitching end. Yeah,
and we'll touch into Didi coming back as well. But like I said, this is the most excited I've been for baseball in years.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, it's a good first step. Going out and addressing team needs is a huge first step. They let Andrew Knapp go, who in the short season was great, and he could fill in from time to time. But as in terms of a reliable backup catcher, you could just pen in that he was going to go 0 for 4 every game. He wasn't an offensive threat by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm not saying Garrett Stubbs is, but just get somebody different in there. They can't do any worse than what Knapp was doing at the plate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and you're entirely right.
what's the harm in just changing? Like, okay, we replaced Neris with Hand. Hand can't be hated any more than Hector Neris was, truthfully. I think Hector Neris might be one of the most hated relievers I've ever seen.
And I think a lot of that's got to do with just how he presented himself. He never showed enough emotion. He could be getting rocked for tons of runs, no emotion. Pitching really great for stretches, which he had done, no emotion.
He didn't have the stones, the emotion. That's a great word. He didn't have it to be a back end reliever, he was very easily rattled. He would unravel really
very quickly.
And on top of that, he was terrible against the NL East. We play 78 games a year against these guys.
Yeah. People who had it's good that you mentioned that. Teams who had seen him several times across the year. It's almost like it's not almost like statistically it is like at the beginning of seasons when Hector Neris would start, he would look really good against these teams, and then they'd see him 3 or 4 times, and all of a sudden his ERA exploded, and it's because he never changed his approach. And as a back end you have to do that. Part of that's coaching. A lot of that's coaching, but some of it's definitely stubbornness on your own part. You trust your splitter enough to just keep throwing it, and it just wasn't getting it done.
Yeah, there was no mix. Now, for a while there, he got a little bit good because he was I think Romuto and the pitching coaches had gotten together and they were like, hey, we're going to offset this with your fastball a little bit. I think I saw a couple sliders in there, like there was some kind of change. You can't throw one pitch and be successful in the MLB. I don't care what your role is. Now, 3 pitches, very good. Makes you a top level starter. 2 pitches can make you a good starter and a good reliever, but you'll never get away with throwing 1 pitch effectively and being an effective pitcher in the MLB.
The thing that got me about Neris never using his fastball was that his fastball was mid-90s. Yeah, it wasn't like he was throwing 89 miles an hour.
I mean, the only thing, though, it was flat. Every time you saw it come out, there was no movement. There was no sink. There was no run. It was a straight line to wherever it was going,
Yeah.
And I think the double-edged sword of not throwing it often enough means he didn't work on it enough. It wasn't located very well sometimes. But
all right, moving off of pitching. Well, not really. Let's move into starter roles. Obviously, we have Zach Wheeler, who finished second in the Cy Young voting last year. We have Aaron Nola, who's getting the opening day nod because Wheeler isn't quite ready to go. He was supposed to pitch against the Blue Jays today. The game ended up getting called in the 6th inning because of rain, and as a result, they elected to not pitch Zach Wheeler because of the threat of rain. But he's on pace to start, I believe, his April 15th start, so he's only missing 1 rotation,
which is fine by me. I think they have a day off supplemented in there in the first week.
Yeah, they do. So it's good. He's only going to miss 1 start. So to start the season, obviously, again, Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez, Zach Eflin, Kyle Gibson, and then you round out what could be a 6th guy with Bailey Falter.
I think he's going to be used in a long reliever role,
which him and Nick Nelson probably should be utilized in that role, but they probably get a start before Wheeler's healthy. They probably collectively get.
I could see like a bullpen game where those 2 kind of eat most of the innings.
Correct. Yeah. But I mean, honestly, Ranger Suarez last year, I think he ended the season at like 6-2 with a just over 3 ERA. Zach Eflin, we know, has stretches where he's really, really good and then really, really bad. So if he can minimize the really, really bad stretch to just like 1 or 2 games. And then Kyle Gibson, when we got him at the trade deadline last year, was absolutely phenomenal before he came over. And he fell off, but he didn't fall off that much. It's not a bad rotation to start the season.
And I'm by no means comparing them to this group of individuals. This is the most confident I've felt about the rotation since the 4 aces. Now, there are light years behind those guys. And I mean, Cole Hamels would probably still be the 1, maybe 2, or potentially the 1 in this rotation. That's how good the 4 aces were. But in terms of what we've seen since then, was garbage, just terrible.
Absolutely. Terrible. Horrendous.
Now, I know he pitched well last year. I know he pitched well in the shortened year. I'm still a little iffy on Ranger Suarez. Not that I think he's going to come out here and blow up and pitch to a 5.4 ERA. But, the shortened season, he pitched to a 2 ERA. He had a little bit over 3. I think collectively he has about maybe 1 full season, maybe 3/4 of a season's worth of starts. So I'm a little hesitant to say, yeah, that guy's going to be like a solid number 3. I would put him at the back end of the rotation. I would honestly put him behind Eflin. Now, has he shown a little bit more promise than Eflin? Yes. However, Eflin has more starts. So,
I understand where you're coming from. You're saying because he was only pitched, and last year he didn't get the starter role till more than halfway through the season.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Here's the Phillies are in contention at the trade deadline, which I'll give you my prediction before we get out of here. I think they most certainly will be. There's no reason they don't go and bolster either the bullpen, which may be struggling at the time, or the starting rotation, which may be struggling at the time.
You can never have too much pitching, so I can't imagine that they won't go after both.
And I agree with that. I also agree with you that it's a little not alarming but concerning that Ranger Suarez hasn't pitched. What are you talking? 33 starts in a season and 162 games. The most he's ever pitched is I think 15 or 16.
Yeah, the math folds out. If you're the top two starters, you get 33, and the back three would get 32. Now that doesn't include off days and jumping rotations. That's just strictly the math.
Yeah. So that is a little alarming, and that's where Bailey Falter and Nick Nelson come in, and that's why I brought their names into the fold to begin with. Is we're going to see bullpen games here and there, like we just are. And Girardi has utilized them his entire coaching career. When he was in Miami, he was doing it. In New York, he was doing it, and now he's going to have to do it here again in Philadelphia. It's nothing new for Joe Girardi to try and figure that out and to navigate around the lack of pitching that he may be forced to utilize here. But strictly based on numbers from last year and the year prior, Aaron Nola should have a bounce back year. And if he does, then they've got one of the best 1-2 punches in the league.
This spring has not been promising for Nola. The same issue he had last year. He's had
long ball.
The gopher ball is biting him, man. I don't know what it is. His ball still looks like it has movement. Still looks like it has life. And it could just be spring training. They play some heavy lineups in spring training. I know they played the Blue Jays quite a bit, who have one of the best young lineups in baseball. Man, I hope he gets this figured out quick. Now, I'm not saying he has to go back to Cy Young 2017, but
that'd be nice.
Yeah, I mean that.
But no, he needs to pitch to a 3 ERA. He needs to.
Below 3. I think it's got to be slightly below 3. He's got to eat 7 innings a start. That's got to be a guy that you give the baseball, and then in the 7th inning is when you start looking back up at the mound like, okay, what's the situation?
I went back and looked at a lot of Nola 17 videos versus Nola last year and a little bit even the year before. In that Cy Young season, the one where he finished runner-up or third, whatever he finished behind DeGrom and Scherzer or whoever it was, he wasn't trying to throw his changeup for strikes. He was throwing it in the dirt and making people miss. And in the last couple of seasons, he's been trying to get it over for strikes, and more often than not, that's the pitch that gets hit out.
I think part of the issue with that is in 2017 he could locate his fastball. Anybody who's ever pitched, I was a pitcher myself. Anybody who has ever stepped foot on the rubber knows that everything you do is built off fastball location. Same thing we just talked about with Hector Neris. If you can locate your fastball, you can do anything, because you set up all your other pitches. But Nola just the last couple of years has not been able to locate his fastball, particularly that front hit fastball that he throws to lefties. The two-seamer that comes back, it's still missing inside, and then he overcompensates and misses out over the plate. I think if he figures that particular pitch out, he should be good. Now, I do like the idea that they were developing that cutter in the beginning of last year. I wish they would have stuck with that a little bit more. Hopefully they do. I think, you think back to guys like, again, Roy Halladay. Not that Aaron Nola is ever going to be Roy Halladay, but at one point, nobody thought Roy Halladay was going to be Roy Halladay.
Good point.
His fastball moved 2 directions. He threw a sinker that ran and sunk to his arm side, and his cutter that cut to his glove side. Nothing came out straight. He had no straight fastball. There was no such thing as a 4-seamer with Roy Halladay, and that was the big thing. You didn't know which way that ball was going to move. Now, that's why I wish Aaron Nola would work on something like that. The deception would be there, but he's got to figure something out with his fastball location. That's been the biggest issue that I've seen over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But the amount of confidence you're already showing in him and giving him the ball on opening day versus a guy who has the hot hand like a Ranger Suarez, it speaks volumes.
And honestly, I think it's part of Joe Girardi's game plan there. Is like, look, I know you had a down year. It's going to happen. Everybody has down years in their career. But we as a team trust you, and you need to get it back. You need to figure it out because we're going to need you if we're making a run here. And the front office has already shown us that we're making a run. So figure it out. And I mean, I appreciate that type of coaching. Like and like I said, I hope the conversation kind of sort of went like that between Girardi and Nola. Hey, listen, it's your time, but you have to take responsibility for it, and you got to figure this out because the front office
we paid you decent money. Now, granted, compared to some of the other top line starters, Nola's making pennies, but I mean, they paid him contract extension, to be at that point in time their number one guy. So
yeah, no, 100% right.
Number two, show why.
Let's get into this lineup that you and I are very excited about. Let's figure it out. So leading off likely is one of our additions this offseason, Kyle Schwarber.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Just Kyle Schwarber by himself at the leadoff spot?
There's about – let's see. Let's list all the people that could lead off. Schwarber could lead off. I'm going to get jumped for this. Hoskins could lead off.
His OBP is over 300 every season, regardless of how he goes through those hot and cold stretches.
300 is a shit OBP. Let's talk like 350, 360.
And it's usually around that, what Rhys Hoskins holds. So that's not a terrible statement, having Rhys Hoskins in a leadoff spot.
Takes a lot of pitches. He sees a lot of pitches. He hates doing it. Bryce could lead off. So he won't. You pay a guy $330 million, he gets what he wants. That's why he doesn't play center field.
That's why we got Nick Castellanos. That's why we got Kyle Schwarber.
Yeah, actually, I think Bryce Harper would be a great center fielder, but that's the reason he doesn't play is because he just doesn't want to play there. He's got the speed. He's got the arm strength. He's got the athleticism. I think he'd be a great center fielder. He just doesn't want to play there. That was actually part of his contract. He won't play center field.
Wait, and again, $330 million. If he doesn't want to play center field, don't put him in center field.
Yeah. But yeah, so there, and I think I talked about this on the show, or I talked about this with you in person, or whatever the case was. I said the signings that they provided gives the Phillies options. There isn't a set leadoff hitter anymore. There isn't like one or two guys that can bat in the two hole. There, Harper doesn't necessarily have to bat number 3, even though he will. Harper has to bat number 3, but there are other people that have the ability to do that. Real Muto doesn't have to follow Harper anymore, and he probably won't. It'll probably be Castellanos.
Yeah, look, here's the biggest thing about the two additions. Is now these guys who were trying to do it by themselves, i.e. the JT Realmutos, the Bryce Harpers, they have protection now. The first 6, and if you include Gene Segura, who's a lifetime 290 hitter, they're protected at this point.
Gene's a great hitter. I just something about Gene Segura. I'm like, we could trade him, and I wouldn't give a shit. But
it's his hustle, and I've been watching a lot of spring training games. When he hits a ground ball in the infield, he does not run.
I've seen him run out balls, though.
It's on occasion, and it's usually after Joe Girardi digs into him. But for the most part, his hustle is just not like here's what I mean by his hustle. So, like, when you think of hustle in Philadelphia, you're looking at, like, the Chase Utleys and the Jimmy, and for the most part, the Jimmy Rollinses.
Don't say Jimmy Rollins.
For the most part. The Shane Victorinos, the Charlie Hustles, like those type of guys when you're talking about hustle in Philadelphia. And Gene just doesn't show that. Also, I don't really particularly like when a guy gets a double, he's over there goofing off with them at second base. I don't like that.
I used to be the same way about it, but baseball's supposed to be fun. At the end of the day, he might play for the Mets, but they're all there trying to accomplish the same thing.
I get it, but I think the reason that you and I feel the same way about Gene Segura, if they let him go tomorrow to anywhere, I'd be like, okay, what'd we get? Cool. And that would be my reaction. It wouldn't be, oh man, Gene Segura. But anyway, to my point for the lineup, Gene Segura is a lifetime 290 hitter. He does take pitches, and he has a little bit of pop, but he's good at putting the ball in the gap. So again, these guys are protected in the lineup. So you're not relying on just 3 guys to move the ball around anymore to score runs. You've got all but maybe one position, and it really just depends on who ends up making the opening day roster and starting at the corner position. Because right now I don't think it's Alec Bowm, but we'll get into it. And just the protection in the lineup is going to be good. I'm predicting this team probably scores somewhere around 5.5, 6 runs a game easy. And if they don't, then they're all really struggling.
I'd say probably closer to 5.
I'm going 5.5, closer to 6.
I mean, I don't even think the best offenses do that. That's a lot of runs.
I said what I said.
But so top to bottom, okay, Kyle Schwarber.
Yes.
I do agree that he'll be in the leadoff spot. He like Rhys Hoskins takes a lot of pitches, walks a lot, some pop. And then the number 2 spot, I think, will be the aforementioned Rhys Hoskins.
So do I, yeah. And then
However,
Bryce Harper
when
obviously
Hoskins goes through his down slumps, you could easily put Segura in that spot. Segura, the way that his hitting style is like a glove for the number 2 hole, very aggressive, very to the right side. An old school approach to the number 2 hole, minus the bunting thing. Number 3 doesn't really need to be talked about. Number 4,
Nick Castellanos.
Yep. Obviously, Romuto can bat there too, but I think Castellanos easily has more pop and better protection for Harper. And Romuto hits well, but for a catcher.
I mean,
think about Romuto's like a 275 lifetime hitter, hit about 25, 30 home runs. Yeah, he's good hitter, but if we're talking number 4, we look at what Castellanos has been doing. Quite frankly, Castellanos has been robbed most of his career, if you think about it. He should probably have about 50 more home runs than he does. However, spending a lot of your time in Detroit and Comerica Park being as big as it is, and that was the thing he was most frustrated about and why he wanted to be traded. He was tired of being robbed by the huge outfield that Detroit has. He led the league in doubles, I think, 2 or 3 years in a row.
Yeah, no, you're right. And Philly is obviously a huge hitters park. He's gonna thrive here.
Yeah, and then he goes to Cincinnati, which is Great American Ballpark, is widely known as probably one of the biggest launching pads outside of Colorado. So he just took off last year. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to seeing him hit behind Hart. Bryce Harper won MVP last year with a hurt JT Realmuto hitting behind him the entire season. Imagine what he's going to do this year.
Thrive because there's no more pitching around him.
Exactly. His numbers are going to be better. His 35 and 96 or whatever it was last year, it's going to be so much better this year.
I can't imagine that with the 2 guys that we project will be batting in front of him and their on base percentages that he'll hit, 18 straight solo home runs to start the year.
Oh, what an embarrassment that was last year for the team as a whole.
For the team, and some of it was on him too. You can't just be like, why aren't you guys getting on base? And then every time somebody does get on base, I think he had plenty of scenarios where he was batting with runners in scoring position that he probably could have gone yard at that point in the season. But at the same time, that's one of those things you can point fingers at each other. It's not one person's fault. However,
that's true.
Can't imagine that that's going to happen again this year. There's no way. When you have a combined, the 2 guys in front of you have 380 OBPs. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah. So behind Realmuto, who is we discussed is hitting 5th. I have. So I'm a huge fan of the left right situation. So after Castellano at 4th, I probably, if Stott makes the roster, I'm not going to lie to you, I would have Bryson Stott hitting behind. I absolutely would. The guy puts the ball in play. You don't need power from the 5 slot. You need to put the ball in play in the 5 slot.
It sure is nice to have power in the 5 spot.
I'm not saying it's not.
However, the guy might not even be an opening day starter.
Yeah, and I understand that. And as the roster sits right now, Didi Gregorius is sitting there, and as such, I will have Didi Gregorius hitting in the 5 slot.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. I think Joe Girardi kind of has a little bit of a hard on for Didi.
Coming from New York, yeah.
So I think a fully healthy Didi could slide into the 5 spot,
which he claims he is, and the defensive play he made the other day makes me think he might be.
Yeah, and you're probably right. Ultimately, I think Romuto is a slightly better hitter, so I think he could probably bat in the 5 slot. However, for the sake of lefty righty, I could see Didi sliding in there as well.
Yeah, and again, I'm a huge fan of doing that, especially because later in games when you got to bring relievers in, it really puts the other team in a bind.
So, do you agree though that if Real Muto's batting fifth, Didi's six?
Yes.
So then we have
Segura 7.
Yeah, Segura 7, and then center
Bowm.
field and third base, which are probably the two biggest question marks on the team. Let's talk about it. Let's talk center field first, because
Okay, so
agree on that.
Matt Vierling, coming into camp, was the likely starter after Herrera got hurt, but he has not hit well at all. Mickey Moniak, on the other hand, is hitting, I think, 383 in the spring, and has an opportunity to make the opening day roster. And at this point, he deserves a shot. The one you gave him last year, you let him play for, I think it was like 7 games.
Yeah, that was stupid. You and I expressed so much frustration about that. That was such a bad play.
Yeah. So again, the kid's hitting 363 or 383 or something this spring. Give him a shot. For me, Mickey Moniak should be starting center field next Friday.
Now it's tough in that scenario because Mickey Moniak was never brought up as a center fielder. He was always brought up as a corner outfielder. So his defense may be a little shady to begin with. However, I think some kind of platoon between him and Matt Vierling, because Vierling's a right-handed hitter. He could bat against the lefties, give Moniak the day off, allow both of those young players to get some exploit. I think this is about right for Moniak, though. I know for years people kind of, part of my friends shit all over that pick because he was number 1 overall pick, and 5 years had gone by and he wasn't in the majors. He was an 18-year-old kid in a weak draft class.
Really, really weak draft class.
Yeah, and we knew that. High school hitters and pitchers are the hardest prospects to develop. Particularly, I think on the hitting side. I think pitchers I think pitchers tend to develop a little bit easier. Because 60 feet 6 inches remains the same. Studying batters' weak points remains the same. Your curveball, you don't throw it any differently. However, seeing good major league pitching versus, crappy high school and college pitching, it's a little bit different. So I think the difference there is why it's a little bit harder as a high school hitter to develop. But, he's still young. He's only 24. He's not, 30 finally getting his shot. I think this is about right for Moniak. Like I said, my biggest concern with him is he's brought up as a corner outfielder, and they even expressed that early in spring training. Now, with his performance, his only shot to start is center field. And mind you, Odubel Herrera is still here too.
Yes, Odubel Herrera is still here. He hit 22 home runs last year. He still shows a lot of inconsistencies in the outfield with his glove, but as we've discussed, the defense on this team is not going to be good. But do you really want to sacrifice another position? I understand that Moniak came up his last couple times as a corner outfielder. However, he did get drafted as a center fielder. He has the ability to play center field, and he's not exactly slow. He could do well out there. So for me, I get it. Odubel Herrera is going to come back, and Odubel Herrera is going to get his playing time because they just signed him to whatever it was, $12 million contract or whatever. But Friday, unless you've got like some really, really good matchup options between Vierling and the pitcher we face next Friday, for me, it's Mickey Moniak in center field.
Yeah, like I said, the way that I would handle it is Vierling gets the lefties, Moniak gets the righties. But that's my opinion. Ultimately, I do believe when he comes back, Herrera's going to get the starting center field position, but he's in a similar boat as Neris in my eyes. Like they're what completely equal. One of those things, good, not great. Get some fresh blood in there, get a different perspective, see what makes it. Moniak, he could be worse, but I mean, he could bat 210 and hit 10 home runs for a season. And really, what are we losing other than, especially with the additions we made? It's not like the old Phillies lineup where we need like every piece to contribute. Now we have the first 6 guys are your big guns, even 7, like you mentioned. Segura's a career 290 hitter. Let's see what the kid's got. I mean, even
exactly. And I'm with you. And I want to see Moniak. I want to see Vierling succeed as well. But Moniak just did. To me, Moniak didn't get a fair shake last year, and as such, I hope he succeeds this year.
Yeah, I would carry 5 outfielders on this team. It would be Schwarber, Castellanos, Verling, Moniak, and Bryce Harper.
Yes.
That's it.
And then when Herrera comes back, you sacrifice whoever's not performing.
He's one of the names on the trade block, in my opinion. Now, nobody's going to trade for him, but you can dangle the offers out there. Herrera, Zach Eflin. I think if they're going to upgrade the rotation, he'd be the odd man out.
Yeah, depending on how Ranger Suarez does, I agree that Eflin would be the odd man out. But I mean, again, going into this, Ranger Suarez, by the midway through the season, he could really be showing signs of fatigue, and we may need to make a different decision.
Yeah, and then they could slide him back to the bullpen and acquire, another arm. That's one of those wait to be seen moments. But if he does withhold, and he holds up his low 3 ERA from the back end of the rotation, and they want to bolster the starting rotation, then Eflin's the odd man out, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Based on what we've seen, Eflin would be the odd man out.
Yeah. The last position we got to discuss, and it's
topic.
It is the biggest topic right now in Philadelphia. Alec Bowm came into camp, undisputed third baseman, has not played there a lot this spring. Johan Camargo and Bryson Stott have been splitting times almost every other day. Bowm got the start yesterday at first base, and he got the start again today at first base. But Alec Bowm, to my knowledge, from what I've been reading, is on the trade block, and the Phillies are aggressively trying to get somebody to take him off their hands. Now, listen, Alec Bowm, it's unfortunate because, Alec Bowm is with runners in scoring position. He's I think, a 313 or a 314 hitter with runners in scoring position, which is absolutely huge, especially when you talk about the guys hitting in front of him in the lineup. A. B, I know his defense isn't good, and maybe that's why Girardi is trying to get somebody with a better glove over there. Camargo does a significantly better glove than Alec Bowm. Bryson Stott has the ability to be a really good should be middle infielder, but I could understand them moving him to third base. But it's just astonishing to me the fall just after a poor sophomore overall season for Alec Bowm. The immediate no, I think we're done on this kid.
Now, his prospects coming out of college, he was not a great defender. He's a little awkward on defense. Average arm at best. He's never going to be Nolan Arenado. He prospects more out as a first baseman in the majors. That being said, that position's already filled. I'm curious, though. I would be shocked if they trade him, and here's why. Rhys Hoskins does not have any sort of contract extension in place. Rhys Hoskins is a free agent at the end of the year. They just paid a couple guys some big dollars. If Rhys blows up because this offense, is now a little daunting to look at, and he has some kind of 45 home run, 120 RBI season, I don't know that they're going to afford to keep him. And they don't really have any first baseman in the pipeline.
They have no first baseman in the pipeline.
Exactly. So at that point in time, what do? Didi's $14 million would come off the books, but that's not nearly going to be enough to cover the contract you'd have to pay Rhys Hoskins. And that'd be the only notable guy that leaves. Odubel, yeah. I can't see them giving up on Bowm so easily, and I know that there's all kinds of rumors talking about that, they're actively shopping Alec Bowm, and I get it. However, I think one stat will save him, and it might not save him for a starting job, but it is crucial to be good at hitting with runners in scoring position late in games. That would be a huge piece to have coming off the bench. Now, would that be a bit of a downgrade for a young guy? Sure. However, is that something that all playoff teams have, is great pinch hitters? Yes. And what do pinch hitters do most of the time? Come in late in games with runners in scoring position, and something that Alec Bowm does very well.
And listen, I'm with you. I don't want to give up on Alec Bowm either. It was just it was really telling how quickly in spring training, at least, that the Phillies as an organization was like, okay, Bowm is not playing third base for us.
I don't necessarily yes, defensively, I think that Bowm did that to himself. However, from an overall point of view, I think Stott performing the way that he did that to himself. I think Didi, being a vet, they're not unable to trade him coming off an injury-riddled season. I think that kind of locks him into the roster. I think other people and their situations had just as much to do with it as Alec Bowm. Now, like I said, this is the last year of Didi's contract. Stock could slide over to short next year. They could be doing this just to give him some playing time. Get him in the majors. Get him some major league at-bats. If he struggles, who cares? You have Alec Bowm and Johan Camargo.
Which brings me to my next point. Who starts third base on Friday?
Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know who's on third. Is I don't know on third. It's who's on first, what's on second.
I don't know who's on third.
Yeah, I don't know who's on third. And that's about as accurate as it gets. Now, Stott does hit left-handed, so that helps him out a lot.
Camargo's a switch hitter.
I don't think Camargo has a shot at being a full-time starter. He was the projected starting third baseman in 2019 for the Braves, and then Austin Riley. And that was all he was. He was a bridge to Austin Riley, and then Austin Riley came up in like May, so that lasted not hardly. I think they brought him in specifically to be a bench piece, but obviously he's got to get some playing time. And now if he came in the spring and batted .450 and played Nolan Arenado defense, then obviously he would start third base. But I don't think that was ever the intention of bringing him in there. That's going to be probably one of the best signings of the offseason. Now I know Schwarber, Castellanos, Hand, all them guys. It pays to have depth on your bench.
It does. It really does. And Camargo is a utility fielder. He can play
He can play all the other. I would keep Bowm and Camargo, obviously, if Stott was to start at third base. Because Bowm can play the corners, Camargo can fill in the middle. Or you can have Stott play in the middle and Bowm play third, and you have options, and
which is extremely important.
28-man rosters, it becomes. But ultimately, I think the third baseman on opening day is Bryson Stott. Do I agree with it? No. And this is what I was talking about earlier. I do not agree with it because Bryson Stott is going to move to shortstop next year when they let Didi Gregorius walk in free agency. Why even bother? That's my thing. Yeah, he's not going to see MLB pitching in AAA, but at the same time, to your point, did the same thing with Scott Kingery. Why run the risk?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for bringing Scott Kingery back into this. And we discussed this off the air right before we got on. Scott Kingery, for those of you who don't know, was a Gold Glove winner at second base in AAA the year before the Philadelphia Phillies brought him up. Obviously, at the time, Ryan pointed out to me they had Cesar Hernandez, who was also playing Gold Glove caliber defense.
And hitting like 290.
Hitting like 290 at second base for the Phillies. So Scott Kingery kind of became this utility player, full-time utility player, and then his career suffered from it. And still has not got back on. A lot of it's got to do with Gabe Kapler and the hitting coach at the time because they were trying to do launch angle and get him to send the ball into the atmosphere rather than just pepper the gaps, which is what Kingery did extremely well when he was in the minors. But to Ryan's point from Bryson Stott, don't do what you did to Scott Kingery to Bryson Stott. Like, let him play his position. Yes, he'll get some AAA ABs later in the season when they expand the roster to 30 players. Bring him up then. Let him get some ABs then at shortstop. Give Didi some rest if they're in the playoff hunt. Like, these are important at bats that he's going to need, but you don't need to force them on him right now.
If Didi comes out and sucks, proves he's not back from his injury at all, then
Bryson Stott.
Yeah, then bring him up.
Yeah.
But don't get this guy focused on a position and then tell him, hey, this is just for a year.
Exactly. Yeah. No, and I'm with you there.
Now, teaching somebody to play different positions for a day here and there, if this was like, hey, you're the starting shortstop, but I want you to play, some third base in spring training. Should we ever need you there in an emergency? That's a little bit different. But you're asking this guy to compete for a position that next year he's not going to play, and that everybody knows he's not going to play.
He knows he's not going to play.
Yeah. So how does – you might think you're helping your team now. How does that help anybody in the long run?
Yeah, in the long run, you're losing. So you and I are definitely on the same page here.
Yeah, I mean, like I've mentioned before, truthfully, I believe they couldn't deal Didi because he's coming off that injury-riddled season. However, I don't see the long-term success, and that's what needs to be thought of with prospects long-term. Like I just mentioned with Bowm, Rhys Hoskins is a free agent as of right now at the end of the season.
Sorry, we both paused at the same time.
Yeah, to read that comment.
So
we're
Ty
do what
is
we do here and entirely switch gears to answer somebody's question, not related about what we're talking about. But that's fine because here we BS our sports.
So Ty is a friend of ours from one of or several of our dynasty football leagues. Says, I don't know anything about baseball, so how about if the Eagles do draft a wide receiver, does that mean the end of Rager? And if so, does Smith's value increase or decrease? So for me, I do not have the Eagles drafting a wide receiver in the first round, so I'm going to have to really spitball here for you, Ty. If they draft a wide receiver in the first round, absolutely Jalen Reagor's time as one of the starting wide receivers in Philadelphia seems to have come to an end because Watkins has surpassed him on the depth chart. As for Smith's value increasing or decreasing, it really depends on what wide receiver they draft. Are they drafting a guy similar to Devontae Smith, or are they going to be smart and get a big, tall guy on the outside who can go up and catch 50-50 balls on a consistent basis, basically as an end zone target situation? But again, I've done several mock drafts this year, and I just don't have the Eagles taking a wide receiver at any time in the first round, and they've got 3 of those picks. So we're going to go into that again in another week, the Eagles draft situation. But from where I'm sitting right here, right now, the Eagles are not drafting a wide receiver in the first round.
So he didn't say the first round, I don't think. He just said, do they draft a wide receiver? I'm reading it again to make sure I'm not stupid.
No, you're right. But even if they draft a wide receiver in the later rounds, you're not expecting him to come up and take Rager's number 1 or first round draft pick spot. You can hope that his production outdoes Rager, and absolutely they could. Again, look at Kaz Watkins. But for the time being, Rager still needs his opportunity. Yes, he's dropped some very critical balls. Absolutely. The Giants game last year.
Todd Pinkston.
Very similar to Todd Pinkston, you're right. Except Todd Pinkston wasn't a talented wide receiver. Jalen Reagor is a talented wide receiver. He's just suffering from the fact that
he sucks.
He sucks.
Yeah. I see where you're going with that comment, and most people probably like, that doesn't make any sense, but I kind of see where you're going with that. He has some skill set. He just can't catch the ball.
In addition to the fact that when he was coming out of college, everybody said that Jalen Reagor's strength was put him in open space and let him create space, and the Eagles have not been able to do that.
No, which is surprising because they have a quarterback that doesn't throw accurately past 15 yards, but that's beyond me.
Coaching.
I completely disagree with your take. One name jumps off the paper to me, and I know we don't want to hear this school's name ever again, but from North Dakota State, Christian Watson, 6'5", 220-pound guy. Got some size, can go up in the end zone, and he just ran, I think, a 4.2 40 at the combine, so he's got some speed to him as well. I think he's a second-round pick. I truly believe that the Eagles should go out and get another wide receiver. Now, does it make a whole lot of sense in this offense? No. They're going to throw the ball 20 to 25 times a game, 10 of which, at least half of those targets will go between Smith and Goddard. So if this was some kind of pass-heavy offense where, you were dropping back 35, 40 times a game and letting it fly, yeah, I think it would make – I personally would absolutely go out and get a wide receiver.
But that's not the offense they run.
Yeah, I think with the scheme that they run, it doesn't make sense. However, I think they're going to do it anyway, mostly just to get a different name in there, kind of similar to the letting Hector Neris go. Get a different name in there. I think if they do keep all 3 of those first-round picks, they're all going to be defense.
Yes, I'm with you there. So the other part of that is I still have them trying to get a wide receiver in free agency, something they haven't done yet. And every time I was not upset about the Devontae Parker thing. A lot of Eagles fans kind of went ape shit and was like, "Oh my God, Roseman is like shit in the bed here because he's not going out and getting these wide receivers that are." The Patriots only gave a 6th-round pick away for Devontae Parker. I got news for you. Devontae Parker has played 16
for a 30-year-old wide receiver who has.
Devontae Parker has played 16 games in a combined 3 seasons.
What are you guys mad about?
Yeah,
For him to play 3 games and pull a hamstring and be out for the rest of the year, I thought we were done dealing with that. For a 3rd round pick, hell no.
yeah.
No deal.
Look, if Christian Watson's there in the 2nd round, absolutely take him. 4.47 was his 40 time. But
yeah, like
in that scenario, which is a very, very limited scenario, talking about drafting the Eagles drafting a wide receiver. In that scenario, yes, Rager is officially not done because he'll still be on the roster, but like done in Philly. Mm-hmm. But again, I just don't see that scenario playing out that way. And as such, Rager will be our 3rd wide receiver coming into the season.
And to answer the second part of that question, if they draft any kind of wide receiver, within the first 2 days of the draft, so the first 3 rounds, it's going to decrease Smith's value. Not by much, but any other weapon that you can add that they will try to utilize, especially in the passing game, will decrease anybody else's value significantly because the Eagles throw the ball 25, maybe 30 times a game if we're losing. But it's a run-first offense.
Yeah. Ty, thanks so much for hopping on and giving us a good question, buddy. If anybody else is on right now and wants to shoot us a question before we get off, fire away.
Yeah, but
back to the Phillies.
Good baseball discussion. We did, last second change the topic, and I said that it would kill 35 minutes. Here we are 50 minutes later, naturally.
It's why this show is so good. We just
did
BS
you ever
sports.
answer whether you think Stott, Bowm, or Camargo is going to start at 3rd base?
I didn't, and the answer is also Bryson Stott, but I don't want it for the same reasons you don't want it.
I could see platoon. Bowm against the lefties.
Which I kind of want Stott to get full-time action. So for me, if Stott isn't your starting third, and I don't want him to start 3rd base, but if he isn't your starting 3rd baseman, you need to send him down. The fan base isn't going to be happy, but you need to deal with it. Bryson Stott needs to go back to AAA if he's not your everyday starting 3rd baseman, and that's just the way it is. And in that scenario, Camargo and Bowm can platoon over there, and then again, you can put Bowm at 1st base to give Rhys Hoskins some time off, and then Camargo around the infield. But no. If Stott is not your everyday 3rd baseman, he needs to not be on the roster.
I 100% agree. I do need to talk to you off air after this for a little bit about something.
That's fine. I got you.
If that's all we have for today, thank you for coming out. Thank you for the questions, Ty. Pay me my money. League buy-in fee. We're getting to draft time, so dynasty leagues are starting to fire back up again for a little bit. Thank you for coming out. So, we enjoy talking baseball. It's probably our most fluent sport, I would say, particularly the Phillies. I think we talk baseball like easier than we talk any other sport. So those are usually my favorite episodes. And that's why the baseball bats are in the middle of our, logo. It's kind of our main thing. And unfortunately, we should get into, potential rule changes and all the other things I've been hearing, that Rob Manfred wants to destroy the game of baseball with. But that's for another episode. We'll see you next week. It'll probably be Friday night. Next Saturday, I'm traveling to Atlanta to go watch the Braves take on the Reds. Should be my 21st stadium if my math adds up right, so I'm getting close.
Yeah, I'm jealous of your 21 stadiums. I will eventually start that travel as well, but it's just not yet.
Your time will come, my young Padawan.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, but thanks again for joining us at BSing Sports, where we do a little BSing and we talk a whole lot of sports. You guys have a good night.